You can now find me on RoadStr, the app connecting people through cars.
Hello everybody. Some people in the comments think that I talk too much, so today on the channel we have the KIA Picanto GT-Line S. It's very good. Goodbye. Was that a bit too short? You see, I think this is a video worth doing properly because this is a car worth talking about. Last year, I sent Kia an email requesting the cheapest car in the press fleet, and what I got was a Picanto 2. The 2 is the trim level, and that's, as you might expect, the second from base model. It's also the most popular variant of that particular car, and I have to say, I rather fell for it. So I was really looking forward to getting this, which is the GT-Line S. This is the top spec, fully kitted out model. So, for your extra money, what do you get? Well, where most of the Picanto lineup is powered by a 66 horsepower, 1 litre, 3-cylinder naturally aspirated engine, this, same displacement, same cylinder count, has 99 horsepower, courtesy of direct injection and a turbocharger. That gives it enough poke to reach 60 in 9.9 seconds and a top speed of 112, which is more than adequate for a city car. This is the entry point into the Kia lineup and the smallest vehicle they currently produce. The GT Line and GT Line S are easily distinguished from the rest of the lineup by their very sporty looking body kit with bumpers front and rear, different side skirts and 16-inch alloy wheels. They are also jam-packed with kit. So this GT Line S model, as standard, has LED daylight running lights, LED indicators, forward collision avoidance, electric folding mirrors, parking sensors and camera at the back. You've got lecky windows all round, and there's more. Though this is what you would now consider the previous generation Kia interior, compared with many of its rivals, this is excellent and not short on tech. Lower trim level cars get only a basic monochrome display here, but higher ones like this get an 8-inch touchscreen display which has navigation, Bluetooth, DAB radio, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. There's more too, like these real imitation leather, black and red seats that I think look really quite nice. They're also good to sit in too. You've got heating for them and the steering wheel, which is something you rarely see. You've got full climate control too. There's also plenty of cup holders, 1 in the door, 2 in the centre. These ones are rather funky. Not so many in the back, but you've also got keyless start and a 6-speaker stereo. This car has a 5-speed manual. Kia have recently introduced an automatic option for the Picanto, but that's an automated manual system, and I'm not really a big fan of those. So if you can live with a manual, I'd say that's the one to go for. It's also the only option of gearbox if you want the 99 horsepower, top of the trim GT Line S. Provided you're not a family of 6-footers, there's also plenty of legroom in the back. I would say 4 adults can go on a reasonable length journey, an hour or two, in relative comfort, and adults with children should be fine for almost any use. Boot space is also class leading. However, bear in mind, this is a city car, so class leading means 225 litres. It's a Kia, not a TARDIS. They can work wonders, but not miracles. And all of this is included in the price. I love the way that Kia do things. All you ever need to choose when you're buying one of these cars is the trim and the colour. That's about it. As it happens, this honeybee yellow, which is rather pale, but I think suits the car quite well, is free. There are a few premium paints to choose from, and they're about £550. But the price of this car, as tested, $16,610. That price includes Kia's now famous 7-year warranty, which for me makes this a very tempting proposition. And if you compare it with one of its closest rivals, the VW Up, you'll see the Kia offers real value for money. There is no direct comparison, I think, in the Up lineup for this based on price and performance, but the closest really is the Up GTI. That is a slightly higher performing car, but for me, the Kia outstrips it in many important ways. The Up GTI has another 15 horsepower and an extra gear ratio compared with this, meaning it is the slightly quicker car. But the Picanto has disc brakes all round, where the Up has drums. This has the real imitation leather interior, whereas the only option on the GTI is cloth. This also has cruise control as standard. It's optional on the Up. The same goes for the climate control, parking sensors, the rear camera. If you want to add all those things to the VW, you'll wind up with a car that costs about £4,000 more than one of these. And for me, the added value simply isn't there when you consider that this also has a much more modern and, I think, upmarket interior too. The infotainment system here feels a good half a decade on from the one in the Up, mostly because it is. In terms of rivals that I'm familiar with, the Picanto also doesn't seem to have very many left. The Skoda Citigo and Seat Mii, the brothers of the Up, are now discontinued. So is the Ford Ka. All but the cheapest Suzuki Swift are more money than this. The same goes for the Ford Fiesta, which really exists in a class above because it is a much bigger and more expensive car. The only thing I've really got any experience of will be the Fiat or Abarth 500 and 595, and the truth is this exists on a different plane in terms of quality, fit and finish. It would be like comparing a 1 Series with a 5 Series. The Golf is so great, and that's not just because I don't really like the Abarth 595. That's just how it is. If you want to buy a car that's cheaper than this new, you're going to have to look at something like a Dacia, and the fact is, even they don't really have a direct equivalent. So then, on paper, all sounds pretty good for the little Picanto. But what's it like to drive? The engine is actually a little star. It sounds quite gruff and a little bit coarse in the way that 3-pots often do, and it's a bit louder than you might expect it. However, it's got reasonable pull all the way from about 2,000 to 6,000 RPM, the red line being at about 6.5. For the country lanes and around town, it's more than adequate. Though officially speaking there is no hotted up version of the Picanto, it's probably best to see this car as that, because if you do, a lot about it makes an awful lot more sense. If there were a hot version of this car, I think it would actually do quite well. Kia would call it the Picanto GT, and all you'd really need over this, I'd say, is maybe another 20-25 horsepower and you'd be onto a winner. The suspension is one good example of what I'm talking about, because with these 16-inch alloys, and I think bespoke tuning for this model, it's just a little bit bouncy and fidgety around town. Compared with the other city cars I've driven in the last week, so a 2016 Skoda Citigo and a VW E-Up, it is the firmest of the three. The E-Up in particular really did impress with its ride quality, was actually genuinely plush. This is not that, but I think it's acceptable in this category of car. The trade-off though is that when you do get to a fun bit of road, the Picanto has a turn-in and agility that will put a big smile on your face. And for the sort of people that get constantly misty-eyed about their Mark I Golf GTIs, this is the sort of car I think you'll probably enjoy. There's more than enough poke to get you out of a junction in a pinch. The gearbox is absolutely beautiful, short throw, very snickety, just about the right amount of notchiness, and though it might be something you just wouldn't really expect to enjoy in a car like this, it is another real highlight. As is the steering. Kia's steering is some of the best in what you term a normal car. Not all of the models are that way, but the Picanto really is. No, it's not brimming with feel and feedback, but it's got a very natural weighting. It's actually a little bit sharper than you might anticipate, and does, in some small way, communicate back to you what the car is doing. Not even a peep out of the tyres there. Really very impressed with this car. Because it's tiny and visibility is generally fairly good, you can also place it with pinpoint precision. After a few weeks driving the F12 about, it's actually doing my head in, because I'm used to a car having about another 6 foot of bonnet out there. This has barely any in it. It's a little bit odd to get used to again. The brakes are pretty decent, they've more than enough stopping power, and the pedals are even set up well enough that you can actually heel and toe in this. The only thing it's missing really for me would be a sunroof. Put that in this and it will be almost perfect. The other real issue that I personally would have with a car like this is that boot space just isn't quite big enough. When I'm out travelling, I'm obviously bringing my camera kit with me all the time, and if I'm doing that, I tend to need somewhere to set up all my cameras, rig everything and all that, so I need some description of flat surface. This just doesn't really provide that. I suppose I could put the back seats down, but then that becomes a little bit of a faff. This is so good, this car. And, as it happens, everybody I've shown it to or taken out in it has also loved it. And this tells you about the appeal of the Picanto. So, for example, my grandmother I took out in it, and she thought it was brilliant, very nicely appointed, comfortable. She was happy with it, and she likes the fact that the back doors swing open quite a way so she can get in easily. My mother even likes it. She says it looks very sporty, although she complained that it wasn't yellow enough. If ever you wonder where I get my fashion sense from, now you know. Today's plain shirt, by the way, is a necessity because all the interesting ones are currently in the wash after a long trip away. Even my buddy James, who's had Ferraris, 911 GT3s, all that sort of stuff, he drove this and he loved it, said it was an absolute riot. And he's not wrong. This really is the kind of car that is all things to all people. Mum and Dad could have one as a second car. It's great to nip into town, go and do some shopping, or take to the station if you commute still. If you've got someone in the family learning to drive, it's also ideal. The sizing is perfect. It's not at all intimidating. The visibility means that you should be able to park it using either traditional methods or, if you prefer, technology. It has your basic safety system, so traction control and forward collision avoidance, which for most drivers I think are unnecessary, but if you've got someone new in the car, I think you'll feel safe knowing it's there. Likewise, if the worst does happen, these also have multiple airbags, even in the lowest trim. It'll also do over 50 to the gallon on a run, and it'll do about 41 to the gallon the rest of the time. In fact, while I've had this car, I've averaged 40.9, which is one of the highest scores I've got in recent times. I must try harder. Now let's see what it's like in the proper twisty stuff. Whee! It really hangs on, this car. Love that gearbox. Genuinely, this is one of the few cars I would actually consider buying new. Ordinarily, I would say, look, save your money, go and get a used one. But first off, the car market at the minute means buying used doesn't really save you anything, and I'm sure there's probably a little bit of a wait to get a new one. However, with the 7-year, 100,000 mile warranty, if you do keep this car for that long, and that's what I'd be aiming to do with it, it shouldn't really be an overall very expensive thing to own. A lot of people are currently very concerned about buying into a combustion engined car, and they're looking at smaller electric cars, the VW Up, the ID3, the Renault Zoe, that sort of thing. But for me, I'm still not convinced of the financial savings of an electric car. In fact, I'm more or less convinced that they're not there. And because the pace of progress with EVs is so rapid, I do have concerns that if you were to spend £30,000 on one of those, for which you wouldn't get something as nice as this, in 5 years it's not going to be worth all that much. Whereas this, because it starts at such a cheaper price, and I think will have a longer term appeal, should be a safer bet. Also, unlike, say, the VW Up, which has a range of about 150 miles, this will do over double that. I wish it did a little bit more. It's one of my few genuine criticisms. A 35-litre fuel tank seems a bit piddly, even for a city car. However, because putting petrol in a car doesn't take that long, if you did want to take something to Scotland, a journey I frequently do, it's very doable in this. It's not even that noisy on the motorway. Small details like the fact that these doors are fully trimmed, unlike in the Up, I think does contribute to an overall higher level of refinement. I'm not saying that this is the best car in the world ever, but in terms of nailing the brief, cheap, cheerful and fun to drive, I think there are very few out there that score as highly as the Kia Picanto GT-Line S. For me, this is a winning formula. If you have suggestions of any other small, affordable cars that you think I need to get my hands on, please do drop me a line in the comments section down below, or ping me an email if you've got one that you'd like me to test. For now though, I want to say a big thanks to you for watching, to Kia for lending me another one of their cars. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.